He dreamed of having a family with the love of his life.
He really wanted to have children.
But his wife couldn't have kids.
They had worked out an arrangement.
They'd be able to have a child of their own thanks to the surrogate.
He was just real excited.
But he will never hold his newborn.
What is your emergency, ma'am?
He was beat to death in his own home.
His hands was tied behind his back.
His wallet is missing, along with the TV.
Is this a home invasion?
All signs point to a break-in.
Or was the couple's arrangement more than he'd bargained for?
The three of them lived together.
I tried to warn him.
All she does is manipulate.
She's got every reason in the world to lie.
September 7th, 2013. It's Saturday afternoon in Fort Worth, Texas, a booming twin city to Dallas.
Fort Worth historically is called Cowtown, known for their rodeos and stockyards.
When I first came to town, it was a lot of cowboys and a lot of country music, but over the past 30 years or so, it's really changed into a more cosmopolitan city.
We're experiencing a phenomenal amount of growth. Since I've been here, we've roughly doubled our population.
But far from the gleaming corporate towers of downtown, Andrea Brown pulls up in front of the modest home that belongs to her brother, 51-year-old Tommy Brown.
It had been several days since Andrea had heard from her brother, and no one in the family had heard from him either.
My aunt called me and asked me had I talked to Tommy, and I advised her the last time I talked to Tommy was on Wednesday.
He wasn't responding to any of her text messages. He wasn't returning any of her phone calls. And this was very unusual for him.
She grows concerned and goes to check on him.
When she arrives, it appears that Tommy may not be home.
I noticed that the truck was not in the driveway.
She proceeded to go and knock on the door to check and see if someone was home.
Tommy, you here?
There's no answer, so she walks around to the side door.
I knew that Tommy would leave the side door open.
Tommy, you here?
The door is locked, and there's still no answer.
Tommy!
I came back around to the front of the house.
Her brother kept the spare key in the mailbox.
The key was actually inside of a cigarette box. And so I opened the door.
Tommy! Tommy, it's Andrea!
Andrea's barely through the door before she senses something is wrong.
As she's walking down the hallway, she stops in her tracks because she sees her brother lying on the floor.
His hands was tied behind his back.
And he's covered in blood.
I had found my brother murdered.
51-year-old Tommy Brown had always lived a quiet life.
Tommy was pretty laid back. He didn't go many places. The majority of the thing he did was be in his garden or sit on the porch and drink beer.
He loved spending time with his family, enjoyed fishing, gardening. He was an all-around good guy.
He was big on organic gardening, which he gave a lot of the things from his garden to the older neighbors because he wanted them to have healthy, fresh produce. So he would share things out of his garden a lot. He really enjoyed kids. He would get out and play ball with them.
When Tommy wasn't in his garden or spending time with family, he was hard at work.
He didn't go to college. He decided to stay home and work in his family's janitorial company.
When my father passed away, Tommy took over the janitorial business, and he also had janitorial contracts on the side with other companies.
He impressed everyone that he worked with and everyone that he worked for.
He particularly impressed one coworker, Katherine Malone.
Katherine was quiet and shy, but she was able to attract Tommy's attention.
I thought she was nice. I felt she was good for Tommy. She got him out of the house. He was really happy.
In 2006, Tommy and Katherine married. But for Tommy, something was still missing.
He really wanted to have children. He wanted to leave a legacy.
There was just one problem.
Unfortunately, Katherine was not able to have children.
That was devastating for him.
But in the spring of 2013, an excited Tommy told family and friends that the couple's prayers had been answered.
Tommy explained that he had worked out an arrangement with a friend of his who would be a surrogate for he and Katherine to have a child.
The friend was 37-year-old Eunice Christina Rodriguez.
She was a free spirit. She's very personable. She was somebody that if you met, somebody certain you would talk to.
Christina had a troubled history, and this was an opportunity for her to get her life back together.
Katherine and Tommy were okay with financially supporting Christina as long as she was pregnant with a child.
He was just real excited, so I was grateful that Christina had agreed to have a child for he and Katherine.
But now, 2 months before he's finally going to be a father, Tommy's sister has just discovered him dead on his bathroom floor.
This is the Fort Worth Police Department.
When I called 911, I told the operators that I needed an officer to come out because I had found my brother murdered.
Did you tell if he was breathing or not?
No, I didn't touch him because of the way he looked and everything.
Police arrive on scene a few minutes later.
Their course of action is, number 1, make sure that there isn't any medical intervention that can be done for the victim, and then 2, sweep the house and make sure there's no other victims or suspects on scene.
Our officers go through that home and do what we call a protective sweep. They're gonna go through the home, they're gonna look at what we're dealing with, and then they're gonna back out, start putting up their tape and restricting access to the crime scene.
Once the house is secure, homicide detectives arrive to begin their investigation.
I don't recall having any other murders in that area. Most of the people in that neighborhood are just pretty honest, hardworking people.
But inside the house, the evidence soon points to a possible scenario.
We have things missing from the home, such as the television.
They were also unable to locate Tommy's wallet, phone, or car keys.
It appears that Tommy could have been the victim of a home invasion.
51-year-old Tommy Brown and his wife Katherine were on the verge of achieving their longtime dream of raising a child of their own.
They worked out an arrangement with another woman to serve as a surrogate mother.
Tommy and Katherine would raise that child as their own.
But Tommy will never get to see the baby he wanted so badly.
On September 7th of 2013, Tommy's sister found her brother dead.
The restroom just off of the hallway appears to be our scene where the murder occurred.
All of the signs point to a robbery.
We have things missing from the home, such as the television, his wallet, and things like that.
Exactly how he died is a bit harder for detectives to determine.
We didn't have a gunshot. We didn't have a knife. This was an out-and-out struggle.
There are defensive wounds as well, suggesting that he fought with his assailants.
Tommy was hit over the head with something very heavy.
There was no obvious murder weapon, but the detectives were able to uncover several clues as to what the potential murder weapon could be.
They noticed that the lid of a toilet was shattered. That was the leading contender for the murder weapon.
The likely murder weapon also gives detectives a lead on the possible motive.
This could have been a burglary gone wrong.
There's the possibility someone gained access to his home and came across Tommy when the perpetrator didn't expect Tommy to be there.
Maybe they panicked and found the first weapon that came to hand.
Whoever had broken the heavy porcelain lid over Tommy's head, it was clear they had tried to conceal their identity.
It appeared his clothing had been saturated with bleach, and there had been a little bit of an attempt to clean up.
Although based on the evidence, the attempt had been half-hearted.
Around him, there were numerous footprints in the blood.
The detectives found 2 different sets of footprints, which led them to believe that there may have been 2 killers.
It appears that the footprints aren't all the killers missed either.
There were blood drops leading away from the body. It's somebody walking away. They're simply straight down, just passive blood drops as that person is walking away. So we're pretty confident we've got an injured assailant, which obviously gives us an opportunity at DNA.
Detectives leave CSI technicians to collect blood samples for analysis. And while Tommy's sister settles from the shock of discovering her brother, they talk to neighbors.
I was trying to identify any witnesses that were in the neighborhood who may have seen something.
Neighbors gave descriptions of 2 different women they would see on occasion coming in and out of Tommy's house.
It appeared that something like this happens on a regular basis.
However, the neighbors also had seen someone less familiar outside Tommy's house.
They had observed an unknown male coming and going from his residence roughly the 2 days prior to his being discovered dead.
They had seen a black male, tall, that had either braids or dreads, walk into Tommy's house. Later, they had seen Tommy come to the house, and the next day, didn't see Tommy's truck, and hadn't seen it since.
Was the mystery man Tommy's killer?
Based on the neighbor's descriptions, he likely had the size and the strength to smash the tank lid over Tommy's head.
But if that's the case, who had left the second set of footprints in the blood?
The detectives had to consider multiple scenarios. Was this an act of vengeance against Tommy? Was this drug-related issue? Did Tommy owe someone money?
Looking for answers, detectives next turned to Tommy's sister.
After things kind of settled down, Detective O'Brien wanted to formally take my statement.
Okay, well, this morning, roughly 8:30, my aunt called me because one of the neighbors was concerned that she hadn't seen my brother.
It had been several days since anyone had even received a text message or a phone call from him.
I sent a text message about 9:30 a.m. this morning and asked him to call me ASAP. And I didn't get any response, so I called my aunt back and I told her that if I didn't hear from him, I would come over to the house when I got off work.
That was when she'd found Tommy's body.
I saw blood, so at that point, I called police.
Still in shock, Andrea is at a loss for who could have murdered Tommy.
Do you know of anybody else who would have been in here with him or anything like that?
To be honest, I don't know.
She doesn't have any information as to whether or not Tommy had any enemies.
There was no indication that Tommy was involved in any criminal activity.
Who all lives here with your brother?
Just my brother, his wife.
Andrea also mentions the couple's surrogate, Christina Rodriguez, who'd been staying with them.
Has she already had the baby or no?
She's due the 1st of November.
Andrea's statement confirms what detectives already learned from neighbors.
Andrea's description of Christina and Katherine made it pretty clear to detectives these were the 2 women that neighbors had described.
As far as the mystery man neighbors also mentioned, Andrea tells detectives she doesn't know who he is.
When detectives shared the description the neighbors gave them, Andrea said it didn't sound like anyone familiar to her.
However, Andrea does think there is someone who might have the motive to hurt Tommy.
According to his sister, the relationship between Tommy and Katherine was extremely toxic.
They was not together. She was just staying there sleeping in separate bedrooms. He had said that she was upset with him.
And according to Andrea, Katherine had good reason to be upset with Tommy and Christina.
Tommy did develop feelings for Christina, and he often said that he liked her.
Maybe Katherine's jealousy over Tommy and Christina's relationship got the best of her, with deadly results.
Tommy Brown's sister, Andrea, has revealed to detectives that 37-year-old Christina Rodriguez might have been more than just a surrogate for her brother and his wife.
Christina came to Fort Worth. She moved in with Tommy and Katherine.
But detectives have just learned that Tommy may have been cheating on Katherine with Christina.
According to Andrea, the couple's arrangement with Christina and Katherine's jealousy had only exacerbated an already unstable situation.
Tommy and Katherine had an on and off relationship. They would get together, things would go fine, they would break up, she would leave.
There were times where it was volatile, sometimes physical.
There were multiple instances where the police were called. It was not a healthy marriage.
Andrea also reveals that Tommy had leaned on Christina for support throughout his turbulent relationship with Katherine.
Tommy had actually known Christina longer than he had known Katherine.
Although they'd never been a couple.
When Tommy met Christina, Christina was incarcerated for about 10 years.
Tommy was friends with Christina's cousin, and Christina's cousin suggested that Tommy get to know Christina by writing her letters.
And that's how they got to know one another, is from being pen pals.
And he had eventually begun to think of her as more than just a friend.
He felt that they would be together had she not been incarcerated.
Instead, he had met and married Katherine.
Tommy told Christina about Katherine, and Christina was often eager to offer Tommy advice whenever Tommy and Katherine were going through a rough spot in their relationship.
Tommy had also told Christina about his wish to have a child.
When Tommy told Christina that Katherine was unable to have children, Christina reached out to Katherine.
Christina wanted to help the couple, saying she'd be happy to not only be a surrogate, but the biological mother as well.
Katherine, well aware of how much Tommy wanted a child of his own, had reluctantly accepted Christina's offer.
It wasn't an ideal situation. However, he didn't have the money to do anything like in vitro fertilization. So the agreement was always that Tommy would father the child with Christina. It wasn't something that caused an issue between the three of them.
At least not at first. But that changed when Christina got out of prison and moved in with Tommy and Katherine.
During this time, Tommy and Christina were intimate.
Things between Katherine and Tommy were continuing to deteriorate. All the while, Tommy and Christina were getting closer.
Then, in April of 2013, Christina gave Tommy the news he'd been waiting for.
Christina announces that she's pregnant and then returns to her hometown of El Paso, where Tommy continues to support her, but Katherine was having second thoughts about the arrangement.
And by the end of the summer, the simmering tension between Tommy and Katherine had finally boiled over.
You are in love with her, aren't you?
No, she's just having our baby.
Don't lie to me.
I'm not lying.
Tommy had kicked Katherine out of the house.
A week later, he was dead.
This led me to think Katherine had killed Tommy.
Whoever was behind the murder apparently didn't know that Andrea had already found his body.
She had texted Tommy at one point and asked for him to call. She didn't initially receive a follow-up text.
Just before her interview with the detectives, she received a response.
I received a text from his phone stating, "I'm driving to El Paso. What you want?"
We knew it's not him because he's deceased at that point.
It was someone pretending to be Tommy.
Tommy's phone wasn't at the crime scene, leading detectives to believe the killer had taken it.
After Andrea made me aware of the text message, I felt it was pretty important.
Detective O'Brien instructed me to text back, "Have a safe trip, contact me when you get back."
I wanted to give the impression as to nobody is any wiser to what's going on at Tommy's house.
The police are hoping that they can keep up this ruse long enough to be able to track Tommy's cell phone.
Back at the station, detectives contact Tommy's cell provider and request his phone records. Then they place a bolo on his missing truck, only to learn it has already been found.
We did some checking and found out that that vehicle had been towed as an abandoned vehicle.
Officers went ahead and towed it to a private lot. When I found that out, I immediately had patrol go to that location and have it secured.
When detectives search the truck, they locate numerous items that appear connected to the crime.
In the back of the pickup truck, there was a trash can with a black bag, and it had a bunch of bloody items in it.
There were some clothes, some items of Tommy's.
There were large porcelain pieces that you could clearly see were the top of a toilet tank.
Finding the toilet tank lid in the back of Tommy's truck was confirmation to the detectives that was in fact a murder weapon.
The search of the truck may also provide a clue to the killer's identity.
Among other things, the detectives also find a bus ticket with the name of Eunice Christina Rodriguez.
But is finding Christina's name among the evidence a little too convenient to be believed?
All of the evidence contained within the truck seemed very suspicious.
It almost makes you wonder if that was left on purpose.
It almost appeared as if someone was attempting to frame Christina Rodriguez.
And detectives can only think of one person with reason to hate both Tommy and Christina.
What would have been the best revenge but to frame your husband's lover for his murder?
You're a hard woman to get a hold of.
Detectives investigating the murder of Tommy Brown have uncovered a trove of evidence from his abandoned pickup truck.
During the search of the vehicle, the police found remnants of a bloody toilet tank lid.
They also find evidence that points directly at Christina Rodriguez, the woman who's supposedly carrying Tommy's child.
There was a bus ticket in the name of Christina going back to El Paso.
The mystery text sent to Tommy's sister also mentioned El Paso, which was Christina's hometown.
It almost makes you wonder if that was on purpose.
All of the signs point to someone trying to frame Christina for Tommy's murder.
Detectives believe that someone is probably Tommy's estranged wife, Katherine.
According to Tommy's sister, not only had he had a huge fight with Katherine, less than a week before the murder, Tommy had actually kicked Katherine out of the house.
Whether it was a frame-up or not, detectives determined that they needed to speak with Katherine.
Detective O'Brien did reach out to Katherine multiple times. There was some difficulty in finding her.
If Katherine and Tommy were in love or in a relationship, one would think that that communication would come fairly quickly, but it didn't. And that raised the prospect that she was a suspect.
It takes several days, but detectives do eventually locate Katherine and bring her in for questioning.
The police wanted to know more about her possible involvement and her whereabouts.
In her statement, Katherine is quick to point the finger at Christina.
That girl, Christina, I tried to warn him not to talk to her no more.
Katherine explained to detectives that she felt that Christina was manipulating him this entire time.
She was supposed to be pregnant. She wasn't. That's what I heard, that she's not pregnant. She just manipulated him all the way. You know, he wanted a baby so bad, and he just did whatever she was asking, like send me money, things like that.
Katherine also claims that Christina had a boyfriend.
She said he actually called Tommy and threatened him.
Awful things, cursing. And then I told him, Tommy, you need to stop messing with that girl and her boy. They're really gonna come over here and kill you.
Could Christina's boyfriend be the mystery man neighbors saw enter Tommy's house?
It was also possible that by claiming Christina had a boyfriend, Katherine could simply be trying to divert suspicion from herself.
Just to ask you flat out, did you have anything to do with Tommy's death?
Nothing, no God, no way.
Katherine also claimed to have an alibi.
She said that she was staying with family at the time of the murder.
Totally not guilty of this.
When detectives follow up, Katherine's family confirms her alibi. But are they telling the truth or simply covering for her? Detectives suspect there may be a way to find out.
Since Tommy's wallet was stolen, detectives wanted to talk to his bank as well as credit card companies to determine if the cards had been used anywhere.
He had an account at a local bank. There's only so much they will share initially without legal paperwork behind it. But they would tell us, hey, his card has been used since the time you all discovered him deceased, and it appears it's been used multiple times.
And so at that time, I wrote a search warrant for those records. And immediately when I got those records, I began writing down all the locations that Tommy's credit card were used.
One transaction occurred at a convenience store.
Detectives reach out to the manager and ask her to pull the surveillance video of the transaction.
When they pulled the surveillance video at the time of the transaction, it wasn't Christina or Katherine using the card.
You saw a tall black male come inside the store and purchase gas.
He matched what the people were telling us during our canvass.
He does have a bandage on his hand, suggesting he had cut himself while committing the crime.
The clerk that we spoke with had also been the clerk working at the time. She was able to tell us, I noticed the wound was still bleeding.
Exterior video from the store also shows the suspect getting back into his car.
Detectives aren't able to read the license plate. However, they were able to determine that there was a woman in the passenger seat.
Unfortunately, the footage wasn't clear enough to confirm the woman's identity.
We didn't get a lot of good shots of her. We could just kind of tell that it was most likely a female.
Could it be Christina in the car, or possibly Katherine? Detectives hope the next place the card was used will give them the answer.
The bank records show that after the stop at the convenience store, someone also used Tommy's bank card at a dollar store a few miles away.
Detectives once again contacted the store, and that manager also agreed to send over surveillance footage from the time of the suspicious transaction.
On that particular video surveillance, you saw the same black male walk in.
Only this time, he's not alone.
He's with Christina.
Surveillance video has given Fort Worth, Texas detectives investigating the murder of 51-year-old Tommy Brown what appears to be a major break in the case.
Detectives now have reason to believe that Christina Rodriguez is behind this murder.
She's with this man that's injured, and they are using our victim's card. So, the plot thickened at that point.
When detectives pull Christina's criminal record, the plot thickens even more.
This is not the first older man that she's robbed.
She had committed an offense with an elderly person that was in her care many years earlier.
In 2002, Christina was living in El Paso. She answered a newspaper ad placed by a family of an 82-year-old man. They were looking for a nurse to help take care of their father.
The man was severely diabetic and blind, basically helpless.
According to court records, Christina had bluffed her way into the job.
Christina had no nurse experience, but she convinced the daughter of the 82-year-old man that she was a nurse at one of the local schools in the area.
Her first night on the job, she tied the man up, ransacked the place, and ran off with a sizable amount of money and valuables.
The elderly man had been roughed up, but otherwise unhurt.
Christina spent 10 years in prison on the robbery charge.
Tommy met Christina while she was incarcerated.
He met someone who knew Christina, and this other person asked him to correspond with Christina.
But now detectives are convinced that while behind bars, Christina had simply been lining up her next victim.
Detectives believe that Christina conned her way into Tommy Brown's life.
Unfortunately for Tommy, he hadn't been as lucky as the victim of Christina's first con.
This one ended with fatal results.
But where is Christina now? And who was the mysterious man with her in the surveillance footage?
Detectives were worried that the suspects would flee the country.
Christina was from El Paso, which is right on the border with Mexico.
And detectives will soon have even more reason to fear that Tommy's killers have run for the border.
Homicides O'Brien.
A friend and former co-worker of Tommy's contacts detectives and says she got a text message from Tommy's phone on the night of September 9th, 2 days after Andrea found Tommy's body.
In the text, the person pretending to be Tommy said he was stranded in El Paso.
The fake Tommy stated that someone stole his wallet and asked her to wire him some money. And since he didn't have any ID, the imposter asked if she could wire some money to his cousin, Braylon Ellis.
We do not have a cousin named Braylon.
But when detectives run a search on his name, they quickly realize they have seen him before.
Braylon clearly was the same individual I'd seen on all the video surveillance.
Detectives are now able to secure an arrest warrant for both Christina Rodriguez and Braylon Ellis.
To locate the fugitives, detectives turn to the U.S. Marshals Service.
We have a group of marshals and deputy marshals that are in our building. We will sit down with those guys, brief them on who we have, what we have, and they start using their resources to start locating these people.
One of the first things the marshals do is ping Tommy's phone, hoping it will lead them to Christina and Braylon.
We knew that phone was most likely still in their possession.
Anytime you turn on your cell phone, information is transferred to a computer somewhere, and the police are able to get access to it.
And after pinging that cell phone, they identified it as being just outside of Atlanta, Georgia.
It appears that those messages about the suspects going to El Paso may have been an attempt at misdirection.
On September 10th, Gwinnett County, Georgia deputies take the fugitives into custody.
Braylon and Christina were arrested out there in Gwinnett County, Georgia.
Anytime we go to another jurisdiction, we have to rely on other agencies to be able to do what we call domesticating a warrant. And what Gwinnett County was able to do through their detectives out there, they were able to actually take our probable cause, convert it into a warrant format that is acceptable in their state, and ultimately led to their arrest.
The suspects were found in a home in Snellville, Georgia, that actually belonged to Braylon's mother.
Braylon and Christina are transported to the local jail, while Georgia police contact the detectives in Fort Worth.
I immediately got on a plane and went out to that location in order to go ahead and start executing and processing the scene out there.
The first thing that detectives do when they walk into the home is dial Tommy's phone number.
When he did that, he heard the vibration of Tommy's phone, and he was able to discern that that was, in fact, our victim's cell phone that was there.
Once they recover Tommy's phone, detectives head to the sheriff's office to question Christina and Braylon.
I attempted to interview Christina first. We got a lot of stuff we want to talk to you about.
But Christina refuses to cooperate.
I talked to my lawyer yesterday in
Okay.
Texas, and he stated to me I can't talk to you.
Okay. We'll see you back in Texas.
Braylon, on the other hand, seems more willing to talk.
He, for the most part, I think was just kind of playing dumb at the beginning. He was very adamant about the fact that he didn't know Tommy. Never met him before? Never heard of him?
I don't know nothing about this dude.
Okay.
He denies having anything to do with Tommy's murder.
Then when I asked him about the cut on his hand, he said, yeah, that's right. I stopped in Dallas where I was bit by a dog.
A straight pit bull attack.
It was at that time that I confronted him with the fact that I clearly had evidence that showed that he was a part of this.
What we don't know right now is why and how you got involved in this.
Braylon was willing to talk, but he was having trouble keeping his story together, which was not unhelpful for my case, because I clearly know with this individual having a cut on his hand, I'm gonna have Braylon's DNA inside the house. So him telling me he's never been to Tommy's house, I basically had no idea what I was talking about. That's incriminating information in of itself.
Caught in his lies, Braylon starts to change his story.
He wanted to make sure that detectives knew one thing about Tommy and Christina.
He beat on her.
He would beat on her?
Yeah.
Detectives have taken 37-year-old Christina Rodriguez and 25-year-old Braylon Ellis into custody on murder charges for killing Tommy Brown inside his Fort Worth, Texas home.
Neither of them confessed, but Braylon did attempt to justify the crime by claiming that Tommy was abusing Christina.
Okay. Tell me something else.
That's all I really know.
According to Braylon, he had never witnessed any abuse. He only knew what Christina had told him.
Christina was able to manipulate Braylon into this whole situation.
But it's no excuse for what Braylon had done.
Both Christina and Braylon were charged with capital murder.
News of Christina's arrest catches Tommy's sister completely off guard.
I was surprised in a sense everything Tommy was doing for Christina. She was getting all of his money just so he could see the child. So yes, I was surprised that it was her.
But it turns out that Tommy would never have seen his and Christina's child, even if he'd lived.
There was a question at the beginning whether she was pregnant at all. While she was in custody, the 9 months ran and there was no child.
It appeared that Christina had faked the pregnancy to take advantage of Tommy.
When Braylon Ellis goes on trial in March of 2016, Christina's manipulation will cost him almost as dearly.
The evidence was overwhelming that he was involved.
Braylon's DNA matched the blood found at the crime scene.
That DNA was enough to earn him a quick conviction and a life sentence.
However, when Christina's trial begins on January 24th, 2017, the case against her isn't as strong.
Prosecutors have very little physical evidence tying Christina to the murder, but what they do have is a very cooperative witness. Braylon agrees to voluntarily testify against Christina because he ultimately figured out that Christina had been conning him as well.
He actually took the stand and he started communicating the things that Christina had said to him, which led him to be a part of this murder. Christina had explained to Braylon that Tommy was very abusive to her.
Since he had fallen for Christina, it wasn't hard to convince Braylon to help her.
According to Braylon's testimony, that wasn't the only lie Christina told him either.
Braylon says they started dating and she soon tells Braylon that she's pregnant with his child.
She had told both Braylon and Tommy that she was pregnant, but till this day, there's never been any evidence to support that she was.
Christina was able to manipulate Braylon's feelings for her by putting him in a role of being the protector over her and what he thought was his unborn child.
So on the evening of September 5th, 2013, he and Christina went to Tommy's house.
According to his testimony, the initial plan was just to beat Tommy up, not kill him.
They entered through the side door that Christina knew Tommy left unlocked.
Braylon says he was hiding in the bathroom when Tommy returned.
When he heard Tommy coming down the hall, he panicked and found the first weapon that he could find, which happened to be the tank lid from the toilet.
Armed with a heavy piece of porcelain, Braylon had laid in wait just inside the bathroom door.
As Tommy reached the bathroom, Braylon stepped out and smashed the lid over his head.
Braylon kept hitting Tommy until the porcelain lid broke into several pieces, cutting his hand in the process.
Tie his hands behind his back.
For what?
Just do it.
Now, if we're talking about was the murder intentional, Tommy was hit in the head numerous times with a toilet tank lid. I don't know how that's seen as anything other than intentional.
I think at some point in this process, people do realize that what they're doing is wrong. But they've gone so far down this road that stopping is really not an option.
Braylon says that once Tommy was dead, they had tried to get rid of the evidence and make the murder look like a robbery.
Tommy's body was splashed with bleach all over, trying to hide their blood or any of the evidence that would lead back to them.
Go get the TV.
She tells him to load Tommy's TV into the truck while she grabs his wallet.
The truck being taken probably served a dual purpose. It served as a mechanism to move some of that evidence away from the scene that they tried to manipulate. And I think secondly, to maybe put a little mystery into this thing.
Braylon says that they took the truck and left it in hopes that someone else would steal it.
But will Braylon's testimony be enough to convince jurors that Christina was the mastermind behind the murder?
Braylon seems like someone that could be easily manipulated and taken advantage of.
I believe the fact that he was basically just her pawn.
And if Braylon's testimony isn't enough, the prosecutors have another witness to back him up.
Prosecutors also called Christina's former cellmate to take the stand.
A fellow inmate said that Christina bragged about how the police would not be able to convict her because there is no evidence. Also, that Christina bragged that she was going to get away with this.
According to her cellmate, Christina had also claimed that she was the one who ultimately killed Tommy.
She said that Christina told her that Braylon couldn't finish the job, so she had to do it.
The defense is quick to challenge the cellmate's story.
As a defense attorney, I was very suspect because it's traditionally unreliable. And for the state to rely on it, it just left a bad taste in my mouth.
The defense also disputes Braylon's testimony.
She didn't take the stand. Her defense attorney wanted to put all the blame on Braylon.
They say that Braylon was the one behind the crime and that he wanted to rob Tommy. Plus, he wanted to get Tommy out of the picture with Christina.
But in closing arguments, the prosecution stands by its claim that Christina bears the primary responsibility for Tommy's death.
Had Christina not showed Braylon where Tommy lived, have not told him any of the things that she did, these things would not have happened.
In the end, the jury agrees, finding Christina guilty of first-degree murder.
Both Christina and Braylon were equally responsible in causing Tommy's death.
His testimony was devastating to Christina.
She was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years.
Braylon got the same exact sentence as Christina, even though Christina was the mastermind.
I don't feel that justice was fully served.
I don't necessarily believe that Braylon should have suffered the same consequences when he was also a victim himself.
Christina is one of those people who wants what she wants. I don't think she really cares about who she manipulates.
It seems to me that Christina is a predator.
And good-hearted Tommy Brown never saw her for what she truly was.
My parents always said you should always try to look for the good in everyone. Unfortunately, trying to find some good in another person cost my brother his life.